Hello and welcome to the Ruby on Rails section of the Go Rails learning path. I'm super excited. We're going to go dig into building a blog application first using Rails. We're going to learn about routes and models and views and controllers. You'll understand the Rails MVC approach, and then we're going to go apply that to a bunch of other applications and learn other things like background jobs, and also repetitively learn the routes, the models and views and controllers, and all those core concepts. You'll get to see them from different angles, solving different problems, and really help understand and solidify your understanding of MVC and Rails itself. So let's dig in. First thing I want to mention is the version of Rails and Ruby that we're currently using. It will be easiest if you follow along and use the same versions as we have here, because if there's a new major version of Rails or Ruby, that might require some changes to follow the tutorial because they've changed something major, which means that, like for example, between Rails 6 and Rails 7 got an upgrade to the JavaScript to use Hotwire by default, which changes some of the controllers and other things you have to do in Rails to make it compatible. So it'll be easiest if you follow along using the exact same versions. So we are using Rails 7.0.4.3, which is the latest version, and Ruby 3.2.1, which is the latest stable version of Ruby. So we want to install Ruby, or install it if you don't have it already. And I have currently Ruby version 3.2.1 installed using a tool called ASDF. So this ASDF is a version manager and allows you to choose the versions of Ruby or Node.js or Java or Python or PHP for your project. So whatever you're doing, each project can have a specific version of Ruby, for example, and then you can switch to a new project and use a different version of Ruby and go back to an old project and use the old version of Ruby. And this is really handy, and Rails will take advantage of this a little bit as well. So if you don't have Ruby already installed, go to gorails.com/setup and find your operating system, like if you're on Windows or Mac OS or Ubuntu, and then you can follow this tutorial, which will help you install ASDF and the Ruby version, and also install Node.js as well, so you can add JavaScript packages for your client-side code in your Rails apps. This will walk you through everything you need to know to set everything up. And it will also help you install Rails, which I already have installed, but we can say gem install Rails-V and use that version that is listed on the Rails site as the current stable, 7.0.4.3. So you want to run this exact command to get the same version to follow this tutorial, so then you can use that. And you can also specify when you're running the Rails command the version with these underscores, and you can say -v, and it should print out the exact same version. So if you have multiple versions of Rails or newer ones like 7.1, you can use this to specify that version. So let's go ahead and create a new application with Rails, and I'm going to call it blog. So this is going to generate a whole bunch of files for us and run some installers so that we can have all of the dependencies in Ruby that we need. So for example, Active Record is a dependency of Rails that allows us to talk to our databases. It's going to install all of those dependencies. I've already got most of them installed. You'll see the green lines is where it's installing new things. And then it also generates all these files for us, which we'll talk about in the future, to give you an idea of how Rails organizes your code base. And then it'll also run a couple other things depending on if you're using the defaults like we did, or you can also specify like CSS, Tailwind, or Bootstrap, and it will do some extra steps to create your Rails application that has Tailwind or Bootstrap pre-installed for you. We're not going to do any of that right now, just to get started, to keep it simple, but that is an example of some of the stuff that will happen when you are there. So if we cd into our blog directory, we should now be able to run Rails server, and this will load up the Rails application, and it uses a tool called Puma to actually start up the web server to accept HTTP requests, and then it will be available on your local host port 3000 by default. So we can open up this in our browser and we'll see, here you are, Rails version 7.04.3 and Ruby version 3.2.1. And now you have Rails running on your system, which is awesome. So let's pause here, and in the next video, we'll talk about all those files and folders that Rails created for us.